What's up, everybody? It's Ace, fourth episode of the TRA videos. Hope everybody's doing well. Today we're going to cover a few short topics. The first one being indie labels, some notable labels that have been around for ages, some that have died, and some of the new ones that are coming out that are really highlighting some of the new talent that's out there and really packaging bands well and really taking performance to the next level. Also want to touch on Gwen Stefani, someone that has been in the scene for a long time and has come a really, really long way, and really interested to hear your thoughts on that. Of course, we'll do our merch dump at the end. So thanks for tuning in. So first, when talking about indie labels, I think it's important to cover that we're talking about the hardcore and underground metal space. So the first label that comes to mind that I think of, obviously, Trustkill Records. So Trustkill Records is a label that started in the early 90s and is no longer an active label. Looks like there's been a lot of controversies with them. And if you listen to a lot of modern day podcasts with some of the bands that have been reviving recently, like Hopesfall, Bleeding Through, Poison the Well, Walls of Jericho, those bands really don't have much good stuff to say. But at the time, especially in the early 2000s, Trustkill was really one of the key labels that were highlighting a lot of this underground punk and hardcore. I remember seeing the Trustkill logo practically everywhere when I was going towards the end of high school. And they were really the first ones that I noticed that were making underground music much more commercial. There's a whole lot of bands that were on them, aside from the ones that I mentioned. I know Throwdown did a few releases, an awesome band, Open Hand, that recently actually just released their new album Weirdo, which is a huge standout for the year, their first album in I think over 10 years, and 18 Visions as well. So those are some key bands. What you saw from this label is that a lot of the artists kind of went and merged into a new label that was started by Carl Severson, who was actually the frontman to Nora. So Nora was previously on Trustkill, and I don't know if it was a lot of just bad taste that made Carl want to start Ferret, but Ferret was really the pinnacle of underground hardcore labels, and were really what were the beginning to what we see today. Some amazing bands that were on Ferret were Blood Has Been Shed. I know I've talked about that band a bunch. Another band that was really good was Eternal Lord. They released one album and disbanded. Every Time I Die started with Ferret, and you can just go down a laundry list on Wikipedia of bands that were on there. Some other personal favorites were Scarlet, See You Next Tuesday, Skycamefalling. I mean, it really was just a remarkable thing that it did for the underground. And what Ferret also did was not only did they distribute music from some of the best bands in the underground, they also just packaged things really, really well very, very early on. So they were one of the first exposures that I saw to the scene that focused on the bundles, where you would see an album come out. Really, they would just have really attractive marketing that would make you want to spend your money buying their stuff. And were one of the first labels that I saw that were making a big effort to really give you a bang for your buck. And now, I mean, you got to think too, this is like before the internet was what it was, where you would look on Apple Music and then there's 12 bands that you might like if you're listening to a certain band. So now when you take a look at some of the new indie labels, one of the big ones that comes to mind for me, Closed Casket Activities. So Closed Casket is a distro from Troy, New York, and they've really held their finger on the pulse with some of the best releases in hardcore over the last few years. Just thinking about 2020, we saw End's new album, Splinters from an Ever-Changing Face. We saw the Acacia strain, It Comes in Waves. Portrayal of Guilt, a new up-and-coming hardcore band that's just really blowing the face off of power violence. The new God's Hate album, and obviously Gulch, which was a monumental release. Impenetrable Cerebral Fortress came out last year. But if you take a look at the Closed Casket website, I mean, their catalog and the way that they package their merch is just remarkable. So they're doing a really killer job. I think that they're taking after what Deathwish has been doing. Deathwish, being a Converge fan for about 20 years, I think are doing probably one of the best jobs. I think The one thing I don't like about Death Wish is that they very rarely update their website and remove things that are sold out. They just let you wallow in things that are out there that you could just kind of drool over and find them on the secondary market, like places like Depop, where they sell shirts and merch that are used, and there's a huge market for it. But Death Wish was one of the first after the Ferret and Trustkill era that I can remember being unique and catered that way. And then lastly, Evil Greed, European distro that's not really a label, but really bringing the mall of underground metal and hardcore to the European market. But obviously they do their distribution globally. And if you look up Evil Greed, they do a really nice job distributing things that we see here stateside. Gatecreeper, Fuming Mouth, Power Trip, Incendiary Nails. It kind of piggybacks what Closed Casket is doing, but with their own flair. I think that Evil Greed is also a distro for all things Death Wish and Closed Casket. So I'm really interested to see on where they take themselves and how they kind of separate themselves from this. But I really think that those are three prominent companies that are really doing a lot for the underground metal and hardcore. So if you're not following Closed Casket or Death Wish or Evil Greed and are wondering where you can find new underground metal and hardcore, I highly recommend following them on all their social media, checking out their websites, and just spending a lot of your hard-earned money there if you're into any of this stuff. All right, next I want to talk about Gwen Stefani. So recently, Gwen Stefani released a new single called Slow Clap. And so, I've freakishly been following this lady's career since I was a kid. I think Tragic Kingdom was one of the first albums that I can remember buying and actually enjoying. And I know No Doubt is a band that I would love to see headline on some big festival doing a classic record. But what's interesting about Gwen Stefani and just the No Doubt era, why is this even coming up, is recently the debut album of No Doubt celebrated its 30th anniversary. So it's hard for me to actually think about that record being 30 years old, because I remember buying that album right after I got Tragic Kingdom in the mid 90s. And now looking back on that and thinking like, wow, that was, when I got into that record, it was just a few years old. And now it's been 20 plus years since I've been putting it on party playlists. And when I think about No Doubt, I know it's hard to kind of forget about the later stages of the band, where kind of started to mix genres towards the Rocksteady era and even the return of Saturn and all that other stuff that they did. But if you really take a look and listen to the first No Doubt record, the self-titled, and even before Tragic Kingdom, the record that we're talking about here, what they were doing at the time was super unique. It almost reminds me of what bands like Turnstile and Slope are doing now to the punk and hardcore community. If you listen to a band like Slope, they just came out with a super fun record that really kind of stands on its own. And it's an obvious influence from what Turnstile is doing, but their record called Street Heat really blends influences from the Chili Peppers, 311, and does a lot of really funky stuff that kind of stands on its own and is super refreshing. And it's almost like what Turnstile did on Nonstop Feeling. When you heard some of their songs, I mean, you instantly heard that 311, Rage Against the Machine vibe, songs like Blue Bayou that just completely blew the roof off of what the expectations and possibilities are for a hardcore record to sound like. And if you are just grilling burgers and throw on the No Doubt self-titled record and let that playlist go, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about if you think about the music that was coming out at the time. And certainly there were always bands like Biohazard and Earth Crisis and Sick of It All that were releasing records at that time, but No Doubt was prominent on the Warped Tour alternative culture at the time. And it's really remarkable to know that they've actually celebrated a 30th anniversary. But now if you take a look and you listen to what Gwen Stefani's doing now, singles like Slow Clap, I mean, that lady is just celebrated her 51st birthday, I believe. And it just sounds really childish to me. But either way, it's a super fun track. But again, happy birthday to the self-titled record of No Doubt. And if you haven't heard it, I highly recommend you check it out. Last thing I want to talk about is the merch dump. So I'm currently wearing a Saves the Day hoodie. I've had this thing for many, many years, and I'm actually a huge Saves the Day fan. And for those that have never bothered with the band, I'm starting with the record Through Being Cool, a super fun, almost emo record where Chris, their frontman, is just putting it all on his sleeve and then kind of forgetting about records like Stay What You Are, which saw some notable success, and then diving deep into the catalog. I think Saves the Day are incredible songwriters. I love every record that they've done. But one thing that's really interesting about Saves the Day is their roots in the punk and hardcore. The best testament to this is Saves the Day were direct support to Bane on their last show at the Palladium in Worcester. So if you are doubting this band's ability to merge in the underground punk and hardcore scene, there's a reason that that band was on that show. It's sort of like how Title Fight finds itself on a lot of hardcore shows. I think that Saves the Day is the same. They started their career on Equal Vision Records, which is known to be sort of an underground punk and hardcore label. Everything from Chiodos to Fear Before the March of Flames on Equal Vision. And, you know, if you haven't ever bothered with Saves the Day, I think Through Being Cool is a great place to start, and then kind of working your way along the catalog. They're a band that took me years to get into. I won't say that I was there in 1999 when Saves the Day dropped Through Being Cool. I was too busy being cool, listening to new metal, and getting into Hatebreed at the time in the Victory Records roster, where I just did not have any tolerance at all for this emo stuff. But as I've gotten older and kind of gone back, I definitely have a bigger appreciation for the band, which is why I spend a lot of time wearing this hoodie. Thank you for checking out the show, and hope everybody's staying safe out there. And hopefully we have new releases and shows coming out to you soon. Stay metal.